I never imagined that moving to Pine Ridge Estates in Boulder, Colorado would turn my life into a legal circus. But the morning I found my snow shovel missing from my garage, everything spiraled into chaos. My name is Keith Patterson, and I'm a federal judge for the District of Colorado. Though most of my neighbors had no idea about my profession since I kept to myself and valued my privacy after long days presiding over complex cases. The snow had fallen heavily overnight, blanketing our upscale subdivision in nearly 18 inches of powder. I had woken up early, made my coffee, and headed to the garage to grab my shovel, the expensive ergonomic model I'd purchased just 3 weeks prior for $200. The garage door was closed just as I'd left it, but when I looked at the hook where my shovel always hung, it was gone. Not misplaced, not fallen behind something, but completely absent. I checked the rest of the garage, thinking maybe I'd moved it, but no luck. Then I noticed something odd. The side door to my garage, which I rarely used, was slightly ajar. The lock looked tampered with, scratches around the mechanism suggesting someone had picked it or forced it open. My jaw clenched. Someone had broken into my garage and stolen a snow shovel. Who does that? I borrowed a shovel from my elderly neighbor, Mr. Henderson, and spent the next hour clearing my driveway while my mind churned. I'd dealt with theft cases in my courtroom countless times, but experiencing it firsthand felt different, more violating. After finishing, I decided to check the neighborhood Facebook group, a place I rarely visited but knew existed. What I found there made my blood pressure spike. Posted just 2 hours earlier was a photo of my exact snow shovel, the distinctive blue and yellow handle unmistakable, with red grip tape I'd added myself for better traction. The post read, "High-quality snow shovel for sale, barely used, $50. First come, first served. Contact Brenda for details." The poster was Brenda Stevens, the HOA president, a woman I'd only met briefly during the mandatory new homeowner orientation 6 months ago. I stared at my phone screen, reading the post 3 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. Brenda Stevens had my shovel. She was selling my property. The audacity was breathtaking. I screenshot the post, noting the timestamp and all the comments from neighbors inquiring about the shovel. Several people had already expressed interest. I threw on my coat and walked 4 houses down to Brenda's residence, a massive colonial-style home with perfectly manicured landscaping even under the snow. Her driveway was already cleared, and I could see through her garage window. There, leaning against her workbench, was my shovel. The red tape on the handle was visible even from the driveway. I rang her doorbell, composing myself. Years on the bench had taught me to control my emotions, to approach situations with calculated calm. The door opened, and Brenda Stevens stood there in a pink velour tracksuit, her blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, her expression immediately shifting to annoyance when she saw me. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she'd rather do anything but help. "Yes, I'm Keith Patterson from number 42. I believe you have my snow shovel in your garage," I said evenly, her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me. That shovel was abandoned property. I found it in the common area near the mailboxes this morning." I felt my eye twitch but maintained composure. "That's interesting because my shovel was stolen from my locked garage sometime last night, and the shovel in your garage has distinctive red grip tape that I personally applied. It's my property." Brenda crossed her arms, blocking the doorway. "I don't know what you're talking about." The shovel I have was clearly abandoned. As HOA president, I have the authority to collect and dispose of abandoned items on community property. I'm well within my rights to sell it. It wasn't abandoned. It was stolen from my private garage. I want it back, I said, keeping my voice level. Do you have proof it's yours? A receipt, serial number? She asked with a condescending smile. I pulled out my phone and showed her the receipt from Home Depot dated 3 weeks prior, showing the purchase of that exact model. Here's my receipt. And I have photos of the shovel in my garage from last week when I was reorganizing. The red tape is clearly visible. Brenda barely glanced at the phone. Anyone could fake a receipt. And red tape, please. Lots of people modify their tools. This shovel was on community property, making it my responsibility as HOA president. I'm telling you it was stolen from my garage. The side door was forced open, I insisted. She shrugged. Sounds like a personal problem. Maybe you should invest in better locks. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a buyer coming in 20 minutes for that shovel, and I need to prepare. She started to close the door. I put my hand on the door frame, not forcefully, just enough to prevent it from shutting. Brenda, I'm asking you reasonably to return my property. Don't make this complicated. Are you threatening me? She asked, her voice rising. I'm calling the police if you don't remove your hand from my door. I stepped back, hands raised. No threat, just asking for what's mine. It's not yours. It's abandoned property that I'm legally entitled to handle as HOA president. Goodbye, Mr. Patterson. She slammed the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, genuinely stunned. In all my years dealing with difficult people, from hardened criminals to obstinate attorneys, I'd rarely encountered such brazen disregard for basic property rights. I walked back to my house, my mind already working through the legal implications. Back home, I called the Boulder Police Department non-emergency line and explained the situation. An officer named Tom Rodriguez arrived 40 minutes later, a young guy probably in his late 20s with a professional demeanor. So let me get this straight, Officer Rodriguez said, sitting in my living room with his notepad. You believe the HOA president broke into your garage, stole your snow shovel, and is now trying to sell it? I know how it sounds, but yes. Look at the Facebook post, the timestamp. My shovel went missing during the night, and suddenly she has an identical one with the same modifications I made. My garage door lock was tampered with. I showed him everything on my phone, then walked him out to the garage to show him the scratched lock. He examined it closely, took photos. These marks are consistent with forced entry. Do you have security cameras? No, I just moved in 6 months ago. Haven't gotten around to installing them yet, I admitted. And you have proof of purchase for the shovel? I showed him the receipt and the photos from my phone. He nodded, taking notes. Here's the thing, Mr. Patterson. This is technically a civil matter since it's under $1,000 in value and involves a property dispute with your HOA. However, the forced entry into your garage is concerning. I'll go talk to Miss Stevens, but I have to be honest, without direct proof she's the one who broke in, it's going to be difficult to pursue criminal charges. I understand. I just want my property back, I said. We walked together to Brenda's house. She answered the door, and her face immediately soured when she saw the officer with me. Miss Stevens, I'm Officer Rodriguez. I need to ask you some questions about a snow shovel, he began professionally. This is harassment. This man is harassing me over a shovel I legally acquired from community property, Brenda said shrilly. Madam, if you could just calm down and answer some questions. You currently have a snow shovel in your possession that you're attempting to sell. Yes, and there's nothing illegal about that. I found abandoned property and I'm disposing of it appropriately. As HOA president, that's my job. Can you show me the shovel? Officer Rodriguez asked. Brenda hesitated, then led us to her garage. She pointed at my shovel, still leaning against her workbench. The officer examined it, noting the red tape. "Mr. Patterson, is this your shovel?" "Yes, absolutely. You can see the red tape I applied, and there's a small dent on the blade from when I hit a rock last week. Right there." I pointed to the dent, which was clearly visible. Officer Rodriguez photographed it. "Miss Stevens, Mr. Patterson has a receipt and photos showing this shovel in his possession until last night. His garage shows signs of forced entry. Can you explain how you came to possess this specific shovel?" "I found it near the mailboxes this morning around 6 a.m. Someone must have left it there. I assumed it was abandoned," she said, but her voice wavered slightly. "The mailboxes are 400 feet from here and from Mr. Patterson's house." "Why would someone break into his garage, take only a shovel and leave it by the mailboxes?" the officer asked. "How should I know? Maybe he left it there himself and forgot. Maybe he's trying to scam me," Brenda said. I felt my patience evaporating. "Why would I scam you for my own shovel?" "This is absurd." Officer Rodriguez held up his hand. "Miss Stevens, I'm going to recommend you return the shovel to Mr. Patterson. If you found it and it belongs to him, the right thing to do is return it." "I'm not returning anything. I found it on community property, which makes it HOA property. He can file a complaint with the HOA board if he wants, but we meet next month. Until then, I'm selling this shovel." She crossed her arms defiantly. The officer looked at me, then back at her. "Madam, this constitutes theft of stolen property. Even if you found it, once you've been informed it's stolen and the rightful owner has identified it with proof, refusing to return it makes you complicit." "Then arrest me," Brenda said with a smirk. "Go ahead. Arrest the HOA president over a $50 shovel. See how that plays in the neighborhood. I know the mayor. I know the police chief. You're a patrol officer. Think carefully about who you're choosing to side with here." Officer Rodriguez's jaw tightened. I could see he was caught between wanting to do the right thing and not wanting to escalate a minor situation into a major incident. Politics, even in small neighborhood disputes. "Miss Stevens, I strongly advise you to return the shovel. This could escalate into criminal charges," he said. "I'll take my chances. Now get off my property before I file a complaint about police harassment," Brenda said, stepping back into her garage and grabbing the shovel. She held it protectively. "This shovel is staying with me until it's sold. End of discussion." Officer Rodriguez looked at me apologetically. "Mr. Patterson, I'm sorry. Without being able to prove she's the one who broke into your garage and given that she claims she found it, I can't arrest her right now. You'll need to pursue this through civil channels, probably small claims court." "I understand. Thank you for trying," I said, though inside I was seething. We walked back to my house and the officer gave me his card. "For what it's worth, I believe you, but my hands are tied without more evidence. If you want to press charges for the break-in, I can file a report, but finding who did it will be tough without cameras or witnesses." After he left, I sat in my living room staring at the ceiling. A federal judge, and I couldn't even get my own shovel back from a petty HOA tyrant. The irony wasn't lost on me, but Brenda had made a critical error. She didn't know who I was, and she just committed several crimes in front of a police officer while also creating a digital evidence trail. I spent the rest of the day documenting everything. I printed the Facebook post before she could delete it. I saved all my photos. I had the police report number. I even drove to the mailboxes and checked for any security cameras in the area. The community center across the street had one pointed at the parking lot, which might have captured anyone walking to the mailboxes. I made a note to subpoena that footage if needed. That evening, I checked the Facebook group again. The post was gone, deleted, but I had my screenshot. More interesting, someone had commented before the deletion. "Brenda, Is this the shovel you were carrying from the Patterson house last night? I saw you around midnight when I was walking my dog past his place. The commenter was Linda Martinez from number 67. I immediately sent Linda a private message, introducing myself and asking about what she'd seen. She responded within minutes. Hi Keith, yes, I saw Brenda walking from the direction of your house around midnight carrying a shovel. I thought it was strange because she was wearing all dark clothing and she looked startled when my dog barked at her. She hurried away toward her house. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when I saw her selling a shovel this morning, it clicked. That's why I commented, but she deleted the post right after. Do you need me to tell the police? I nearly jumped from my chair. A witness. An actual witness who saw Brenda with my shovel leaving my property. This changed everything. Linda, yes, please. Would you be willing to give a statement to the police? This is very important. Brenda stole my shovel and lied about it, I typed back. Absolutely, I never liked her anyway. She fined me $200 last month because my trash can was visible from the street for 3 hours past the pickup time. I was at a doctor's appointment. She's a tyrant. I'll call the police tomorrow. I thanked her profusely and immediately called Officer Rodriguez. He didn't answer, so I left a detailed voicemail about the witness. He called back 20 minutes later. Mr. Patterson, if this witness is credible, we can pursue theft charges. I'll visit Miss Martinez tomorrow morning and get a formal statement. If what she says holds up, I'll go back to Miss Stevens with an arrest warrant. Thank you, officer. I appreciate you following through on this, I said. Hey, nobody likes a thief, especially one who lies to police. If she really did steal your shovel and lied about finding it, she's going down for it, connections or not. I slept better that night knowing justice might actually prevail. The next morning, I went to work at the federal courthouse in Denver, a 40-minute drive from Boulder. My day was packed with hearings, including a complex civil rights case that demanded my full attention. But during lunch, Officer Rodriguez called. Mr. Patterson, I have good news. I interviewed Miss Martinez this morning. She gave a detailed statement with times, descriptions, everything. She's willing to testify if needed. I also pulled security footage from the community center. It's grainy, but it shows a figure matching Miss Stevens' description walking toward your street around 11:45 p.m. and returning around 12:15 a.m. carrying something long, consistent with a shovel. Combined with the forced entry evidence and your proof of ownership, I have enough for an arrest warrant. My heart raced. You're arresting her. As soon as the warrant's approved, should be this afternoon. I wanted to give you a heads up. What about my shovel? I asked. We'll seize it as evidence. You'll get it back once the case is resolved, but it might be a few weeks. That's fine. I just want this resolved properly, I said. Oh, and one more thing. When I started digging into Miss Stevens' background as HOA president, I found something interesting. She's been collecting fines from residents and depositing them into a personal account, not the HOA account. The HOA treasurer filed a complaint 3 months ago, but it went nowhere because Brenda shut it down. This might be bigger than just your shovel. I leaned back in my chair. Embezzlement. Theft. Brenda Stevens was racking up charges. That's definitely something that should be investigated thoroughly. Already on it. The detective unit is getting involved. Thanks for reporting this, Mr. Patterson. Sometimes small crimes lead to bigger discoveries. That afternoon, around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from the neighborhood Facebook group. Someone had posted, "Did anyone else just see Brenda Stevens get arrested in her driveway? Police everywhere." The comments exploded within minutes, neighbors speculating about what happened. I allowed myself a small smile. Justice, even in small neighborhood disputes, mattered. But I wasn't done. The fact that Brenda had tried to intimidate a police officer, had stolen from a resident, and had apparently been embezzling HOA funds meant this needed to be addressed at a higher level. Over the next few days, the neighborhood gossip reached a fever pitch. Brenda was charged with burglary, theft, and after further investigation, embezzlement of HOA funds totaling nearly $30,000 over 2 years. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, which I attended. The meeting was held in the community center, and nearly 100 residents showed up. The remaining board members, 3 people who looked shell-shocked by the revelations about their president, sat at a table in front. Gerald Morrison, the vice president who was now acting president, opened the meeting. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. As you're aware, Brenda Stevens was arrested 3 days ago on multiple charges. We're still processing what this means for our community and the HOA. We've hired an independent auditor to review all finances, and we're cooperating fully with law enforcement." Hands shot up around the room. Questions flew. How did this happen? Where did the money go? Who knew? Why wasn't it caught sooner? Gerald did his best to answer, but it was clear the board had been negligent. Brenda had consolidated power, intimidated anyone who questioned her, and operated with minimal oversight. Then someone asked, "What about Keith Patterson? I heard this all started because Brenda stole his shovel." "Is that true?" All eyes turned to me. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of 100 stares. "Yes, it's true. Brenda broke into my garage, stole my snow shovel, and attempted to sell it while claiming she'd found it on community property. When I confronted her with proof, she refused to return it. A witness saw her leaving my property with the shovel, and security footage corroborated it. Her arrest stemmed from that initial theft, which led police to discover the financial discrepancies." I kept my tone neutral, factual. "What kind of person steals a snow shovel?" Someone shouted. "The kind who thinks they are above the law," I replied. "Which is why it's crucial we elect board members who understand accountability and transparency." The meeting continued for 2 more hours, with residents demanding reforms, oversight, and new elections. I volunteered to help draft new bylaws that included financial oversight requirements and term limits for board positions. Several people approached me afterward, thanking me for standing up to Brenda and not letting it go. One woman, probably in her 60s, grabbed my hand. She fined me $400 because my rose bushes were supposedly the wrong color. Who decides the right color for roses? I'm so glad she's gone. The stories kept coming. Brenda had terrorized the neighborhood for years, using the HOA as her personal fiefdom. The shovel was just the tipping point that finally brought her down. 2 weeks later, I received a call from the district attorney's office. They wanted to discuss the case against Brenda Stevens. I agreed to meet, though I made clear I couldn't be involved in any official capacity due to potential conflicts since I was the victim. The ADA, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, met me at a coffee shop near the courthouse. "Mr. Patterson, thank you for meeting me. I wanted to discuss our approach to Miss Stevens' case. We have her dead to rights on the burglary and theft charges related to your shovel. The embezzlement case is more complex, but we're building a solid case. The problem is her attorney is trying to paint her as an overzealous volunteer who made bookkeeping errors, not a criminal." I sipped my coffee. "What do you need from me? Your testimony at trial will be crucial. You're credible, you have documentation, and the fact that she lied to police and continued to refuse to return your property even after being confronted shows intent and consciousness of guilt. But I need to know, are you the Keith Patterson?" "The federal judge," I nodded. "Yes," her eyes widened. "She stole from a federal judge and didn't know it. I keep my professional life private in my neighborhood. Most people don't know what I do. I prefer it that way. It lets me just be a regular neighbor." Patricia laughed, shaking her head. "This is priceless." Her defense attorney is going to lose his mind when he finds out. "Mr. Patterson, would you be willing to testify? I know it's unusual to have someone of your position testifying in what started as a petty theft case, but it's grown into something significant." "I'll testify. What she did was wrong, and the financial crime she committed hurt the entire community. If my testimony helps secure a conviction, I'm happy to do it," I said. "Thank you. The trial is scheduled for 6 weeks from now. I'll have my office coordinate with yours for scheduling." Over the following weeks, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. New HOA board members were elected, including a retired accountant who implemented strict financial controls. My shovel was still in evidence, so I bought a new one, making sure to photograph it thoroughly and install security cameras around my property. The trial date arrived in late March. The snow had melted, replaced by early spring flowers. I took a personal day from work and arrived at the Boulder County Courthouse early. The irony of a federal judge testifying in a county criminal trial wasn't lost on me. Patricia Chen met me in the hallway outside the courtroom. "Ready, always," I said. The courtroom was smaller than what I was used to, but familiar in its layout. Brenda sat at the defense table with her attorney, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit who looked confident. When Brenda saw me walk in, her face paled. She whispered frantically to her attorney, who shrugged and whispered back. The trial proceeded through opening statements. Patricia laid out the case methodically: the burglary, the theft, the lies to police, and the embezzlement. The defense attorney argued that these were misunderstandings, that Brenda had indeed found the shovel and had been managing HOA finances to the best of her ability without proper training. When I was called to testify, I walked to the stand and was sworn in. Patricia began her questioning, establishing my identity and that I lived in Pine Ridge Estates. "Mr. Patterson, can you tell the jury your occupation?" she asked. "I'm a federal judge for the District of Colorado," I said clearly. The defense attorney's pen dropped onto his legal pad. Brenda's mouth fell open. The jury members exchanged glances. Patricia allowed the moment to breathe before continuing. "And Judge Patterson, can you tell us what happened on the morning of January 15th? I recounted everything in detail, discovering my shovel missing, finding the forced entry, seeing Brenda's Facebook post, confronting her, the police involvement, everything. I kept my tone professional, sticking to facts, avoiding editorializing. "Did Miss Stevens know you were a federal judge at the time of these interactions?" Patricia asked. "No. I don't advertise my profession in the neighborhood. I prefer privacy when I'm home." "And when you showed her proof that the shovel was yours, including receipts and photographs, how did she respond?" "She refused to return it. She claimed it was abandoned property that she had the right to sell as HOA president. She threatened to call the police when I asked for it back." Patricia displayed the Facebook post on a screen. "Is this the post you saw that morning?" "Yes, that's my screenshot of it before she deleted it." The questioning continued for another 20 minutes, Patricia methodically destroying any credibility Brenda might have had. Then came cross-examination. The defense attorney stood, smoothing his tie. "Judge Patterson, isn't it true that you never actually saw my client take your shovel?" "That's correct. I discovered it missing in the morning," I answered honestly. "And isn't it possible, as my client claims, that she found the shovel near the mailboxes and genuinely believed it was abandoned? Given that she was seen by a witness leaving my property around midnight carrying a shovel, and given that security footage shows someone matching her description in that area at that time, and given that my garage lock showed signs of forced entry, no, I don't find that credible," I said calmly. "Your Honor, the witness is offering conclusions," the defense attorney objected. "Sustained. The jury will disregard the witness's opinion on credibility," the judge said, though the damage was done. The defense attorney tried a few more angles but couldn't shake my testimony. I was excused after 40 minutes on the stand. Linda Martinez testified next, describing in vivid detail seeing Brenda with the shovel. The security footage was played, grainy but clearly showing a figure matching Brenda's build and height. Officer Rodriguez testified about the forced lock and Brenda's changing stories. Then came the embezzlement evidence. The HOA treasurer, a nervous man named Richard Webb, testified about discovering missing funds and Brenda's refusal to provide documentation. The independent auditor walked through financial records, showing systematic diversion of HOA funds into Brenda's personal accounts. It was damning. Brenda chose not to testify, which was probably smart given how her attorney's case was collapsing. The defense's closing argument tried to create reasonable doubt about the shovel, suggesting maybe someone else stole it and left it where Brenda found it, but even I could see the jury wasn't buying it. The embezzlement charges were impossible to defend against with the paper trail. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They returned with guilty verdicts on all counts: burglary, theft, embezzlement, and fraud. Brenda's face crumbled as the verdicts were read. She'd gambled on her connections and lost. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 months later. In the meantime, the neighborhood experienced a renaissance. The new HOA board was responsive and reasonable. They refunded the bogus fines Brenda had imposed. They returned the embezzled money from Brenda's seized accounts. They implemented new rules focused on maintaining property values without the petty tyranny. I got my shovel back from evidence, though by that point it had become a symbol more than a tool. I hung it in my garage in the same spot, a reminder that no one is above the law, regardless of their position or connections. Sentencing day arrived in late May. The courtroom was packed with Pine Ridge Estates residents who wanted to see justice served. I sat in the gallery, taking in the scene. The judge, Marilyn Torres, was someone I knew professionally. She was tough but fair. Brenda stood before her, looking diminished in her orange jumpsuit after being held without bail for violating the terms of her release by attempting to contact witnesses. Judge Torres reviewed the case, her expression stern. "Miss Stevens, you held a position of trust in your community. You were elected to serve your neighbors, to protect their interests and maintain their property values. Instead, you abused that trust in the most egregious ways. You stole from a neighbor's home. You lied to police. You embezzled thousands of dollars, and when confronted, you showed no remorse, only entitlement." Brenda's attorney tried to interject with a plea for leniency, citing her previous clean record and community service. Judge Torres held up her hand. "I've read the letters from residents describing years of harassment and abuse of power. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a pattern of behavior demonstrating a belief that rules don't apply to you. For the burglary and theft charges, I sentence you to 2 years in county jail. For the embezzlement charges, I sentence you to 5 years in state prison, to run consecutively. Additionally, you will pay full restitution to the HOA and to Mr. Patterson for his legal expenses and property damage. You are permanently barred from serving on any homeowners association board in Colorado. 7 years total." The courtroom buzzed with whispered reactions. Brenda began crying, her attorney looking defeated. As I left the courthouse, several neighbors approached me, shaking my hand, thanking me for not letting it go. One man, probably in his 40s, said something that stuck with me. Most people would have just bought a new shovel and moved on. You taught us that standing up for what's right matters, even in small things. He was right. It was never really about the shovel. It was about accountability, about not letting bullies win just because fighting back seems like too much trouble. It was about the principle that theft is theft, whether it's a $200 shovel or $30,000 from an HOA account. That evening, I sat on my back deck with a beer, watching the sunset over the Rocky Mountains. The neighborhood was peaceful. Kids played in yards. People walked dogs. Someone was grilling, the smell of charcoal wafting through the air. This was what a community should feel like, without fear of arbitrary fines or retribution from a petty tyrant. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Gerald Morrison, the new HOA president. The subject line read, "Thank you." I opened it. "Keith, on behalf of the entire Pine Ridge Estates community, thank you for your courage in standing up to Brenda and seeing this through. What started as a stolen shovel revealed deep corruption that had poisoned our neighborhood for years. Your actions freed us from that. We're voting next week on permanently naming you as our HOA legal advisor if you're willing. No pressure, but we could use your expertise to make sure this never happens again. Best regards, Gerald." I smiled and typed a response agreeing to help, with the caveat that I couldn't make every meeting due to my work schedule, but would be available for consultations on legal matters and bylaw reviews. It felt good to contribute positively to the community rather than just being another anonymous resident. Over the following months, life in Pine Ridge Estates transformed. The new board was transparent, posting monthly financial reports online. They held regular town halls where residents could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. They repealed the most absurd rules Brenda had implemented, like the one about approved rose colors, or the restriction on holiday decorations visible from the street for more than 30 days before the holiday. Property values actually increased because people wanted to live in a community known for reasonable governance rather than HOA horror stories. Real estate agents started using "not like that other neighborhood with the crazy HOA lady" as a selling point. I ran into Officer Rodriguez at a coffee shop in Boulder one morning. He grinned when he saw me. "Judge Patterson, how's neighborhood life treating you?" he asked. "Much better without having my tools stolen. How about you?" "Good. That case actually led to a promotion for me." Turns out Brenda had connections to several other HOA boards in the county where similar financial irregularities were happening. It opened up a whole investigation. "We've made 3 more arrests. Your shovel started a domino effect." We chatted for a few more minutes about the case and its aftermath. He mentioned that Brenda had tried to appeal her sentence, arguing it was excessive for a first-time offender, but the appellate court upheld it, noting the severity and duration of her crimes. "Justice served," Rodriguez said, raising his coffee cup in a mock toast. "Justice served," I agreed. As autumn arrived and the leaves turned golden across Boulder, I reflected on the entire experience. What could have been dismissed as a minor property crime had revealed institutional corruption and abuse of power. If I'd just bought a new shovel and forgotten about it, Brenda would still be terrorizing neighbors and stealing from the HOA. The experience reinforced something I'd always believed from my years on the bench. The law exists to protect everyone equally, regardless of the size of the wrong. A $200 theft matters just as much as a $1 million fraud when it comes to upholding the principle that stealing is wrong. One Saturday morning, I was out front planting fall flowers when a moving truck pulled up across the street. A young couple was moving in, probably early 30s, excited and nervous the way new homeowners always are. I walked over to introduce myself once they'd unloaded some boxes. "Welcome to Pine Ridge Estates. I'm Keith Patterson from across the street," I said, extending my hand. The husband shook it enthusiastically. "Thanks, I'm Mike Johnson, and this is my wife Sarah. We're so excited to be here. We heard this neighborhood has an amazing HOA. I couldn't help but laugh. It does now. Let me tell you a story about why that is." I gave them the abbreviated version of the Brenda saga over lemonade in their new living room. Their eyes widened as I described the shovel theft and everything that followed. "You're a federal judge?" Sarah asked, amazed. "And she stole from you?" She didn't know. And honestly, it shouldn't matter. Wrong is wrong regardless of who the victim is. "But yes, the irony wasn't lost on anyone," I said. Mike shook his head. "That's incredible. So the HOA is actually functional now." "Very. New board, new rules, full transparency. You'll actually enjoy living here." They thanked me for the welcome and the story. As I walked back across the street, I felt genuinely happy for them. They were moving into a community that had learned hard lessons about governance and accountability. The anniversary of the shovel incident arrived in January, marked by a blanket of fresh snow that reminded me of that morning I discovered it missing. I'd bought yet another shovel, having worn out the replacement I'd purchased during the trial. This one was a simple model, nothing fancy, and I'd installed a locked cabinet in the garage to store all my tools. The neighborhood Facebook group, which had been renamed Pine Ridge Estates Community, with strict rules against selling or drama, had a post from Gerald Morrison. "1 year ago today, an incident occurred that changed our community for the better. Thank you to all residents who stood up for what's right and helped us build a better HOA. Here's to continued transparency and community spirit." The comments were filled with gratitude and reflections on how much better life had become in the neighborhood. Someone even posted a meme of a snow shovel with a cape, captioned, "Not the hero we expected, but the hero we needed." I laughed out loud at that one. My work at the federal courthouse continued as usual, complex cases involving constitutional questions, federal crimes, and civil rights disputes. But I found myself more passionate about the work, more connected to the real-world impact of the law. The shovel case, as minor as it seemed compared to the cases I usually handled, reminded me why I'd become a judge in the first place: to ensure justice for everyone. I received a letter one day at my chambers. It was from Brenda Stevens, postmarked from the Colorado Women's Correctional Facility. I hesitated before opening it, unsure what to expect: threats, blame. I slit the envelope carefully. The letter was handwritten, the script shaky. "Judge Patterson, I'm writing to apologize for what I did. I know an apology doesn't undo my actions or the harm I caused. When I saw you testify at trial and learned you were a federal judge, I felt ashamed. But I've had a lot of time to think in here, and I realize I should have felt ashamed regardless of who you were. I stole your property. I lied. I abused the trust of our neighbors for years. I told myself I deserved the money because I worked hard as HOA president, that the residents were ungrateful and needed strict rules. I was wrong. I became the kind of person I always claimed to hate: entitled, dishonest, and cruel. I'm working with a therapist here to understand why I acted that way. I have 5 more years to serve, and I intend to use that time to become a better person. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I take full responsibility for my actions. Sincerely, Brenda Stevens. I read the letter twice, trying to gauge its sincerity. It seemed genuine, but I'd seen enough manipulative defendants to be skeptical. Still, if she was truly working on herself, that was good. Not for me, but for her and for society when she eventually got out. I filed the letter away and didn't respond. Some things don't require a response. Accountability means accepting consequences without expecting absolution from victims. Spring returned to Boulder, bringing wildflowers and mountain snowmelt. The HOA organized a neighborhood block party, the first in years. Apparently, Brenda had canceled them, claiming they were too much liability and hassle. The new board saw them as community-building opportunities. I helped set up tables and grills in the community center parking lot. Neighbors brought dishes, kids ran around playing tag, and someone set up a speaker system playing classic rock. It felt like what a neighborhood should be. People who chose to live near each other enjoying that choice. Linda Martinez, the witness whose testimony had been crucial in Brenda's conviction, approached me with a plate of her homemade tamales. "Keith, you have to try these. Family recipe," she insisted. I took one gratefully. "Linda, I never properly thanked you for coming forward." "Your testimony made all the difference," she waved dismissively. "Please. I was walking my dog and saw something suspicious. That's just being a good neighbor. You're the one who pursued it when most people would have let it go. That took guts." We stood together, watching kids play and neighbors chat. She pointed to a young family laughing by the grill. "That's the Williams family. They moved in 3 months ago. You know what they told me? They almost didn't buy in Pine Ridge Estates because they'd heard horror stories about our HOA. But then they researched what happened, saw how the community responded and reformed, and decided this was exactly where they wanted to be. Your shovel literally saved our property values." I laughed at the absurdity of that statement, but she was partly right. The publicity around Brenda's case had forced the neighborhood to confront its governance problems and fix them. What could have been a scandal that destroyed the community's reputation, instead, became a story of accountability and positive change. As evening fell and the party wound down, I helped clean up, loading folding tables into storage. Gerald Morrison worked beside me, gathering trash. "Keith, I've been meaning to ask you something," he said. "How did you stay so calm through all of it? When Brenda refused to give back your shovel when she lied to the police, all of it, you never lost your cool." I thought about that while tying up a garbage bag. My job requires staying calm in high-pressure situations, but honestly, I was furious. I felt violated and disrespected. But I knew that if I let my anger control me, I'd lose credibility. The law works best when people follow process, document everything, and let the system work. Brenda thought she was above the system. I knew I wasn't, so I worked within it, and the system delivered justice. Gerald nodded thoughtfully. "I'm glad you moved here. This neighborhood needed someone like you. It needed people like you willing to step up and lead honestly," I countered. "I just kicked over the rock. You all cleaned up what was underneath." Summer arrived with hot Colorado sun and afternoon thunderstorms rolling off the mountains. My gardens flourished under the care I was finally able to give them without worrying about HOA violations for unapproved mulch colors or flowers planted outside designated areas. I was weeding one Saturday when an SUV pulled up. A woman in her 50s got out looking uncertain. She approached my property line hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you Keith Patterson?" she asked. "I am. Can I help you?" "I'm Susan Reynolds. I live in Evergreen Meadows, about 20 miles from here. Our HOA president is doing things very similar to what your Brenda Stevens did. Arbitrary fines, financial irregularities, intimidation. I read about your case online and wondered if you could offer any advice." I stood, brushing dirt off my knees. Come on, let's sit on the porch and talk. For the next hour, Susan described a situation eerily similar to what Pine Ridge Estates had experienced. Their HOA president, a man named Marcus Webb, had consolidated power and was running the HOA like a personal fiefdom. The problem is nobody wants to stand up to him. They're afraid of retaliation, more fines, harassment. I'm currently facing $1,000 in fines for supposedly violating rules about lawn maintenance, but my lawn is perfect. It's clearly retaliation because I questioned his financial management at the last meeting, Susan said, frustrated. You need to document everything. Take photos of your lawn with timestamps. Save all communications from the HOA. Request financial records. You're entitled to them as a homeowner. If he refuses, that's a violation of Colorado HOA law. And don't be afraid to involve law enforcement if you suspect criminal activity. That's what broke the case here, I advised. We talked through strategies, legal requirements, and how to organize other residents. I gave her Officer Rodriguez's contact information, suggesting she reach out to Boulder PD to learn about their investigation process, which might help her local police department if they weren't familiar with HOA fraud. Thank you so much. I feel like I can actually fight this now, Susan said as she left. Watching her drive away, I realized the shovel incident had become something bigger than just my story. It was inspiring other people to stand up against HOA abuse throughout the region. That felt meaningful in a way I hadn't anticipated. My phone rang later that evening. It was Patricia Chen, the Ada who'd prosecuted Brenda. Judge Patterson, I hope I'm not bothering you on a weekend, she said. Not at all. What can I do for you? I wanted to give you a heads up. Brenda Stevens is being transferred to federal custody. Turns out her embezzlement scheme involved using HOA funds to pay for personal expenses, then filing false tax returns to hide the income. The IRS got interested, and now she's facing federal tax evasion charges. Your case opened a much bigger can of worms. I absorbed that information. Tax evasion was serious, potentially adding years to Brenda's sentence. How did they connect it? I asked. The state investigation uncovered her financial records. When the IRS reviewed them as part of the restitution process, they found patterns consistent with tax fraud going back 5 years. She owes over $100,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest. The federal prosecutor wants to know if you'd be willing to testify about the original theft if it goes to trial. It establishes a pattern of dishonesty and criminal behavior. Of course, whatever's needed for justice to be served, I said. Thank you. I'll keep you posted on developments. After hanging up, I sat on my deck, processing this new information. Brenda's original crime, stealing a $200 shovel, had now mushroomed into state and federal charges that would likely keep her imprisoned for over a decade. The trajectory from petty theft to major fraud was a stark reminder of how criminal behavior escalates when unchecked. The federal trial never happened. Brenda's attorney negotiated a plea deal where she pled guilty to federal tax evasion in exchange for a 7-year federal sentence to run concurrent with her state sentence. She'd serve the full 7 years in federal prison, then complete her remaining state time. With good behavior, she'd be out in 12 years total. Life continued in Pine Ridge Estates. The HOA functioned smoothly under Gerald's leadership, and then under his successor, when he chose not to run for re-election, wanting to travel with his wife instead. The culture of transparency and accountability persisted, institutionalized in revised bylaws that prevented any single person from having too much control. I served as the HOA's legal advisor for 3 years, before stepping down to focus on a particularly demanding caseload at work. But I stayed involved in community events and continued to be someone neighbors felt comfortable approaching with questions or concerns. 5 years after the shovel incident, I was promoted to Chief Judge of the District of Colorado. The promotion meant more administrative responsibilities, but also more opportunity to shape how justice was administered in federal court. In my acceptance speech to the Judicial Conference, I told the shovel story, using it to illustrate the importance of taking every case seriously, regardless of the amount in controversy or the profile of the parties. Justice isn't just for major cases or powerful people, I said. It's for everyone who's been wronged, whether they've lost millions or a $200 shovel. When we dismiss small injustices as not worth pursuing, we send a message that some wrongs don't matter. Every wrong matters. Every victim deserves their day in court. That's what equal justice under law means. The speech was well received and later published in a legal journal. I got emails from judges across the country sharing their own stories of small cases that revealed larger issues. One evening, about 7 years after Brenda's arrest, I was leaving the courthouse when I saw a woman standing near my car. She looked familiar, but I couldn't immediately place her. Then I recognized her. It was Brenda Stevens. She'd lost weight, her hair was grayer, and she looked worn down by years in prison. "Judge Patterson, I'm sorry to approach you like this. I just got out on parole last week and I wanted to speak with you if you have a minute," she said nervously. I paused, calculating risks. We were in a public parking lot near a federal courthouse with security cameras everywhere. I decided to hear her out. "I have a few minutes. What did you want to say?" I asked, keeping my distance. "I wanted to apologize in person. I wrote you a letter years ago, but I know you never responded, and I don't blame you. What I did was inexcusable. I stole from you," I lied. "I hurt our community. I've spent 7 years thinking about the person I became and how to be different." She spoke quickly, as if afraid I'd walk away before she finished. "I accept your apology, though you don't need my forgiveness to move forward with your life. What are your plans now?" I asked. "I'm living with my sister in Denver. I'm working at a warehouse doing inventory. It's honest work and I'm grateful for it. I'm never going near an HOA again. I'm not allowed to legally, but even if I could, I wouldn't. I've seen what happens when people get a little power and forget they're accountable to others." She looked down at her hands. "I destroyed my life over a snow shovel and petty pride. I wanted you to know I understand that now." We stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then I said, "I hope you rebuild your life successfully. Everyone deserves a second chance after they've paid their debt to society. But understand that trust is earned slowly and lost quickly. It'll take time for people to trust you again if they ever do. Focus on being honest and humble and maybe you'll find peace." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for giving me a chance to apologize. I know I don't deserve it." She walked away, disappearing into the evening crowd. I stood by my car for a long moment, processing the encounter. Part of me felt satisfaction that she'd taken accountability. Part of me remained skeptical about whether people truly change. Time would tell. I drove home to Pine Ridge Estates as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. My house came into view, modest but comfortable, surrounded by gardens I'd cultivated over the years. The shovel that had started everything hung in my garage, a reminder of an extraordinary chapter in an otherwise ordinary life. Inside, I poured a glass of wine and sat on my back deck, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood. Children laughing, dogs barking, neighbors calling to each other over fences. These were the sounds of a healthy community, one that had learned the hard way that governance requires integrity and accountability. My phone buzzed with a text from Gerald Morrison. "Hey Keith, new family moving in next week asked if they could meet you. They've heard the shovel story and want to meet the local legend. You free for coffee Saturday?" I smiled and texted back my agreement. The shovel story had become neighborhood lore, passed down to new residents as a cautionary tale, and a source of pride about how the community had reformed itself. Saturday morning arrived clear and cool. I met Gerald and the new residents, the Chen family, at a local coffee shop. They were in their mid-30s with two young kids who were more interested in muffins than adult conversation. "Judge Patterson, thank you for meeting us," Mr. Chen said. "We heard about what happened with your HOA president and wanted to say we appreciate what you did." We looked at several neighborhoods, and Pine Ridge Estates stood out because of its reputation for good governance. That's directly because of how you handled that situation. I appreciate that, but the real heroes were the neighbors who demanded change and the new board members who implemented it. "I just didn't let someone get away with stealing my property," I said. Mrs. Chen laughed. "I think it's more than that, but we won't argue. We're just glad to be joining a community with such strong values." We chatted for an hour about the neighborhood, schools, and local recommendations. By the time we parted ways, I felt confident they'd fit in well. The neighborhood had become a magnet for people who valued community and good governance, a reputation earned through adversity. Years continued to pass. I handled hundreds of cases from the bench, some high profile, some routine, all important to the people involved. But people still asked about the shovel case more than anything else. It had resonated in a way my judicial opinions never would outside legal circles. A law school invited me to speak about access to justice, and I centered my talk around the shovel incident. "The legal system can be intimidating and expensive," I told the students. "But it exists to protect everyone's rights, not just those with resources for lengthy litigation. When someone violates your rights, whether it's a constitutional question or a stolen shovel, pursuing justice sends a message that the rule of law matters. You'll be the lawyers who help people navigate that system. Never dismiss someone's case because it seems small to you. To them, it might be everything." The students asked thoughtful questions about balancing access to justice with limited resources, about encouraging people to stand up for their rights without encouraging frivolous litigation, about practical strategies for handling HOA disputes. It was one of the most engaging talks I'd given. On the 10th anniversary of the shovel incident, the Pine Ridge Estates HOA threw a community celebration. They'd commissioned a small plaque for the community center, dedicated to the principle that accountability matters, that no one is above the rules, and that standing up for what's right strengthens us all. January 2026. At the ceremony, Gerald Morrison, long retired from the HOA board but still active in the community, gave a speech. 10 years ago, our neighborhood was controlled by fear. Fear of fines, fear of retaliation, fear of speaking up. One man's refusal to accept that fear changed everything. Keith Patterson didn't know he was starting a revolution when he went looking for his stolen shovel, but that's exactly what happened. Today, we celebrate not just that anniversary, but a decade of community governance done right. I was asked to say a few words. Standing before neighbors old and new, I felt genuinely moved by how a simple act of standing up for myself had created lasting positive change. I moved to Pine Ridge Estates, looking for a quiet place to come home to after dealing with complex legal issues all day. What I found was a community with problems, but also with potential. Brenda Stevens' theft gave us an opportunity to confront those problems and build something better. You all did that. The new board, the engaged residents, the people willing to volunteer their time and expertise to govern fairly. That's what made the difference. I just refused to let a bully win. You all built the